Hello, I'm Faith Rogers, host of today's program, COVID-19, Keeping Up with a Moving Target. As a note to our learners, we will begin publishing our educational series only once a week beginning in July. Please continue to join us on our full-length live and on-demand webinars as we continue to learn more about COVID-19. This activity is jointly provided by the Postgraduate Institute for Medicine, DKB Med, and the Institute for Johns Hopkins Nursing. Today's program is accredited for ANCC and AAPA credit, as well as AMA PRA Category 1 credits. Please visit our website for complete CE information. If you're tuning into our webcast, please click the red Claim Credit button in the webinar console to attest for credit. Otherwise, please visit covid19.dkbmed.com. This educational activity is supported by independent medical educational grants from Gilead Sciences Incorporated, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, and Eli Lilly and Company, as well as in-kind support by DKB Med LLC. All activity content and materials have been developed solely by the activity directors, planning committee members, and faculty presenters. With us today, we have Dr. Paul Auwaerter, Clinical Director of the Division of Infectious Diseases at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Dr. Auwaerter, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Faith. The news this week is on the COVID front has certainly been dominated by the Delta variant on a number of aspects. This variant of concern now was first described earlier in India, but now has become widespread. And although much of the United States is at low risk levels with community prevalence rates of positive testing of under 1%, as is the case in Maryland and many other communities, there remain hotspots throughout the country, especially in states that have lower immunization rates. And the concern now is a bit of a race where we may have increasing amounts of COVID infections in communities without higher immunization rates. And also perhaps again, especially among younger people who are not immunized to the same degree as people in risk group categories. This slide from the CDC is a bit older. It's running about a month old. But importantly, what you can see is that the so-called Alpha variant, which established itself very quickly in January and became the dominant virus, that's the one labeled B117 here, has decreased with the rise of P1 and B1617.2. That latter one is the Delta variant. And most importantly, the latest data suggests that over 50% of the currently sequenced viruses in the United States are now made up by this Delta variant. So why is everyone talking about it and as concerned? Because previously the Alpha virus, the Alpha variant, was concerning because of the increased transmissibility and perhaps the increased virulence. Well, the Delta variant now accounts for over 90% of infections in the United Kingdom. I have the slide here, 20%, but really late breaker information suggests it may now be half. And compared to that earlier Alpha variant, this Delta variant is now perhaps 50 to 70%, some have even said 100% more transmissible, with perhaps an increased risk of hospitalization, so the severity of illness. And there does look like there's reduced protection regarding the Delta variant by both vaccine and perhaps we'll talk about later, monoclonal antibodies. Perhaps most glaringly, if you've only received one immunization of either an mRNA vaccine or the AstraZeneca chimpanzee adenovirus vaccine, it looks like that is largely insufficient in terms of protecting against COVID-19. And even with Pfizer and AstraZeneca, it looks like there's less protection as well. So why is this? This Delta variant has 9 mutations with potential, and no one really knows for sure why this these mutations have made this even more transmissible. Some of the series are a particular mutation, P681R, which is adjacent to the so-called furin site cleavage. This is where a human enzyme helps participate in cleaving and allows the virus to enter cells. So this mutation is thought to be perhaps problematic. Another one that many have discussed is the so-called N-terminal domain supersite, and that's in this diagram to the right, where 2 amino acids are deleted, and the amino acid at 158 is changed from arginine to glycine. And it looks like this helps reduce one of the antibody neutralizing binding sites, so that if you are generating anti-spike protein antibodies, you've sort of lost one of the main binding sites. Now, it's not clear which of these or multiple ones are participating in these changes, but these are the concerns, and it makes sense for why we may be seeing more breakthrough infections and potentially more transmissibility. Now, some recent information that's just come out from Israel suggests that the Delta variant is quite widespread there, and the protection rate's only 67% from this mostly Pfizer induced immunity within the country, where they have very high rates of participation with immunization. But importantly, it looks like protection against severe illness landing you in the hospital is still quite excellent at 94%. So perhaps there's some reduction in that overall previously excellent protection that was seen in clinical trials. But most importantly, and this is perhaps the emphasis to really driving people to please try to be immunized, is it does still appear, even in the face of this Delta variant, to protect against hospitalization and severe illness. Now, one other issue, we've talked on previous programs about female fertility. Interestingly, of course, there have been social media false statements that any of the Moderna or Pfizer vaccines may affect male fertility. I just thought this was an interesting publication that just really refutes that these vaccines affect fertility. This is a study where people participate in producing sperm for analysis pre and post immunization. There's often wide variation in the amount of sperm produced, both in concentration and amounts. So there is this wide variation, but importantly, if anything, as you look at this, that the amount of sperm seen is actually higher post immunization rather than lower. Of course, this could just be variation, but importantly, doesn't suggest that there's any genuine effect on male fertility. And this is something that a number of family members have asked me about. And it's nice to have some proof, even though there was really no scientific basis for this particular concern. And then lastly, the number of people that continue to ask about repurposed drugs are quite high. Some of this is driven by, again, social media, but also in Brazil, where the president there still espouses hydroxychloroquine use, even though that there's been no credible trials to really support its role. Ivermectin, which is an antiparasitic agent, has been proposed based on in vitro evidence to have effect. There have been 10 trials, 5 against standard of care, 5 with placebo, mostly for a mild to moderate illness, which did not show, even in aggregate meta-analysis, statistical relevance in terms of reducing mortality. And these authors quote that the trials really had very low quality of evidence. Also, a reduction in duration of illness. Again, no convincing evidence by a statistical analysis, and there is no impact at all at reducing the amount of virus. There are 3 trials within here that suggested a mortality benefit, and those were at very high risk of bias because of design, open label nature, and so on. So at least from these existing trials, there's no conclusion to be reached that really should suggest it be used. but many countries without access to care, this is still being taken because they really don't have access to medical care. And the thought is it's better than doing nothing. There are two large trials planned, one run by Oxford, as well as another, to try to look at this in a rigorous randomized controlled fashion. I personally think that it's unfortunately a waste, but perhaps this will help prevent people from taking an antiparasitic for this viral disease. So we may know more in the next coming months regarding this particular repurposed drug. So we do have some questions from learners, and you can always feel free, please, to send your questions, and we'll try to get to them on a weekly basis. Of course, with the advent of the Delta virus, one question is, are the monoclonal antibodies still effective? Two important points here. First, Health and Human Services, HHS, has actually removed bamlanivimab and etesivimab, that combination, because of its lack of benefit against the Delta variant and also the Gamma variant, the P1, and potentially others. However, the good news is that the casirivimab and divimab combination, as well as sotrovimab, the new monoclonal, both still appear to have some effectiveness. And of course, we'll get some additional information over time with increased use of this new monoclonal antibody. So my advice would be that if you have a patient with risk factors who acquires COVID-19, even if they've been immunized, they may not have responded well. So if it's early in illness, refer and have them get the monoclonal antibody infusion. And remember, the casirivimab and divimab combination can also be given by subcutaneous route. And the last question for this week is what other antivirals are being looked into for COVID-19 treatment? The real hole or gap, as it were, in treatment for COVID-19 are oral antivirals. Molnupiravir is one oral compound that was originally developed for hepatitis C. It has fairly good test tube activity against the coronavirus, and that is currently in trials. Some preliminary information suggests that it was perhaps effective in reducing viral clearance, but we haven't yet seen published information, only a preprint. There's also another drug from the Atea Corporation, I believe it's called A527, that's also in phase 2 trials. So hopefully there'll be some oral compounds which can be used before the illness progresses to hospitalization that could stave this off. But do remember that we do have monoclonal antibodies for people at risk. So these two questions are actually quite relevant for outpatient treatment. So I want to thank you very much for listening for this week. Please send questions, and hope everyone is hopefully having a good summer and encouraging immunization for your patients whenever possible. Thanks so much for listening.
If you're tuning into our webcast, please click the red Claim Credit button in the webinar console to attest for credit. Otherwise, please visit covid19.dkbmed.com. Any questions or issues, feel free to email us at the address listed. To submit questions, please send them to qa@dkbmed.com. That's Q as in question, A as in answer, at dkbmed.com. Again, thanks for joining us, and thank you for your dedication to your patients with COVID-19.